DJ Scream, heavy in the streets.
We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood. We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood.
Hood rich.
Get it out the mud.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And this evening we have some appetizers for you, and we are talking about UFC 308 Ilia Topurai versus Max Holloway, and that is October 26, 2024. So the Saturday coming up, 9 Central, 10 Eastern time at Etihad Arena in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. So it's another Middle Eastern event that they're having here, and quite a few of the fighters on there are either Russian or they're Middle Eastern, and some of the fights I guess allow some fighters to fight that aren't allowed to fight in the U.S. I guess Sahar Magmadov, because he only has one eye, pulling the Michael Bisping. That's about the only place that allows him to fight. But anyways, let's get into this card here. So I'm just looking over before I get into it to see. Really isn't a whole lot from the preliminary card. Just only real notable names there is I guess is Jeff Neal versus Rafael Dos Anjos, but that's about it. So there's not really too many great or exciting fights on the preliminary and like early prelims like there were at UFC 307. But there are a lot of interesting matchups. A lot of these matchups on the main card seem like they're literally matched up to so that there will be a good fight. Sometimes fights are just the styles of fighters don't match up well, but a lot of these fighters have the same style. So you'll get to see them mostly fight in their comfort zone, and then you'll kind of have to see who decides that they want to change and have go to a different skill set because the style that they're most comfortable for isn't feeling as if it's the path to victory. But anyways, let's get into this. So can I get a menu? And so the first fight on the main card we were just talking about Sahar the Bullet Magmadov in the middleweight versus Armin Petrosyan, and so we were just talking about how has the one eye. Some people call him Sahar the Bullet or the Pirate. I don't know how much I would like that nickname if I being called a pirate if I had one eye, but I've seen some people say that. But he's a very young and has a lot of potential upcoming fighter. I don't know how much it'll hold him back from if he was able to ever get a title shot. How much that would hold him back, being that he's only like allowed to have fights like outside of the states, and a good portion of them have come. See here, most of them have been either in Russia or Saudi Arabia for the most part, either in Russia or the Middle East for the most part. Not too many fights. I don't think he's never had a fight in the U.S. It's been China, Russia, Brazil, and so Thailand, Saudi Arabia, the Middle East. But still, he's definitely a lot of potential for a young fighter and exciting, and maybe taking a bit of a step up in competition here. But also, you could maybe say this is kind of a setup for a fight for him to hopefully be able to get the win here. But Sahar Magmadov, he is his main like fighting style would probably be like Muay Thai and kickboxing, which that's a little bit different from a lot of these like Russian fighters. For a lot a lot of the Russian fighters are usually just like great at like sambo and wrestling, but there's a few on this card that like their main skill set is striking. That goes along with Magomedov Ankalaev as well. Uh, let's see, in his he's undefeated, so and he's 6-0 in his last six fights. But he's 3-0. He's only had three fights in the UFC, one with one TKO and then two decisions. But in those 14 fights, he's 14 wins, zero losses with 11 knockouts and three by decision. So I mean, it shows that he's definitely has his main path to victory is trying to get the knockout and keep it standing and striking. But you probably say that he is having a bit of a step up in competition with Armin Petrosyan, uh, who also his main like fighting style is Muay Thai and kickboxing as well. So they have very similar styles. So it'll be cool to see and interesting to see who gets the better of that matchup and who might decide to attempt to go for some wrestling and to go for some takedowns because that happens a lot of times in these fights where the two fighters facing each other have a similar style, and it's just waiting to see who gets the better of it and who's the first one to try to shoot for a takedown. Uh, but Armin Petrosyan, he is 4-2 in his last six fights, and he was Ra- Roberto Avera was the last fight he had. He got into arm triangle choke submission, so he's been submitted recently in his last fight. That was February 10th, 2024. So that was at the beginning, close to the beginning of the year. But he's had 12 fights with nine wins and three losses. In the nine wins, he's had six six wins by knockout, no wins by submission, and three by decision. And then in the three losses, he's been knocked out, he's been submitted, and has lost one by decision as well. Just going off of just and he's had quite a few more fights in the UFC than Sahar. Sahar, he's had six fights in the UFC and is, let's see, yeah, so that's where he's 4-2 in his last six fights, and he's 4-2 in the UFC. But this almost seems like a fight that's kind of like uh, set up for Magomedov to like add to his resume. Uh, uh, I think they're equal fighters and all, but I think Sahar Magomedov is definitely the more talented and upcoming, and I would say is probably the favorite in this fight. And just because Armin Petrosyan was probably going to play into what Sahar Magomedov wants to do, I think that could lead to him getting a knockout in this fight. So in this middleweight bout between Sahar Magomedov versus Armin Petrosyan, I'm going to go with Sahar Magomedov. I think he's going to get the knockout in this because I think Armin Petrosyan may not have the best game plan and coming in and wanting to stand in front of him and strike, that just might not go well for him. All right, so now onto the second fight on the main card. We have a featherweight bout between Liron Murphy versus Dan Ige, and this also seems kind of similar how it's set up because Liron Murphy is undefeated, and then Dan Ige has like eight losses. But both of these fighters, they got their start like in boxing and kickboxing, and then they kind of turned to actually just strictly training in mixed martial arts, and they're like true mixed martial artists, I would say, even though Liron Murphy doesn't have like any submission victories on his uh, on his uh, record yet, and he's had quite a few fights in the UFC, and probably just kind of now getting noticed, getting a shot on the main card of a pay-per-view. But he is 6-0 in his last six fights, and the previous fight His seventh fight back was a draw, and he's had 15 fights with 14 wins and 0 losses, and then the one draw, and 7 wins by knockout and 7 wins by decision. So similar like the first fight on the card. It's just two strikers, boxers, kickboxers facing each other. That's the majority of these fights on this card are like that, where basically the skills match up very well to what should lead to a good fight, you would think. Because Dan Ige, he's also would prefer to strike, keep it standing and striking, and he is 3-3 in his last 6 fights, and in the 26 fights that he's had 18 wins and 8 losses, but and then in the 18 wins, he has 16 by knockout, 5 by submission, and 7 by decision. And then in the 8 losses, he has just eight by decision. So he's very durable and doesn't get finished, doesn't get knocked out or submitted. And he shows that he's a true mixed martial artist because he can get the knockout, he can get the submission, he can get the win by decision. But he's definitely a true veteran in the UFC, even though he's only 33 years old. But he still had 26 fights and a lot of fights. Probably more than half of his fights in his career have been in the UFC. So he's definitely a veteran in the game. But like I said, it's just kind of similar to the first fight. It seems like it's almost kind of set up for Leron Murphy to kind of add a bigger name to his record, a win over a bigger name to his record, because it's a good fighter that has a similar fighting style to him, but I definitely would say that they're at least not on a hot streak like Sahar Magmedov and Leron Murphy, because they're undefeated. So in this fight, this featherweight bout between Leron Murphy versus Dan Ige, I think I'm going with Leron Murphy. But because Dan Ige is so tough and he's had 26 fights and never been knocked out, never been submitted, I don't think Leron Murphy is going to do that either. But this should be a stand-up fight and should be a war. But I just don't think Leron Murphy is going to get the stoppage. So in the featherweight bout between Leron Murphy versus Dan Ige, I got Leron Murphy winning this by decision. All right. And now on to the light heavyweight bout between Megmad Ankalov versus Alexander Rakic. And this fight, at least for Megmad Ankalov, I think this could lead to him probably getting a shot at the light heavyweight championship, maybe getting a shot at Alex Pereira, which I would like to see that. So you probably already kind of know who I want to win this fight. But Meganov, he has a very pretty common style for a Russian fighter from Dagestan, combat sambo. So he's a great wrestler, but at the same time he's got good striking as well. And I've seen him rely on that more in the majority of his last 4 fights that I remember watching. He definitely preferred to stand and strike and did a lot of damage in those fights. And he has got kind of a weird record in his last 6 fights. He is, let's see, if I can, 1, 2. So he is 4-0-1-1, and the 1-1 is a no contest against Johnny Walker, and then a draw against Jan Blachowicz. And the no contest against Johnny Walker, well, he turned around a couple months later and knocked him out. And then another fight where he had stand up and got the knockout. He got one over Anthony Smith, who, if you know, that's my favorite. That's my favorite fighter. But in his 21 fights, he has 18 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw, and 1 no contest. In the 18 wins, he has 10 wins by knockout, 0 wins by submission. So even though he's got the sambo background as well, he doesn't really go to it. Doesn't really go directly to it. His first path to victory is definitely striking, and definitely doesn't have that much of a submission game. Even though I'm sure he knows chokes and things like that. But if I was to expect him to win this, it would probably be in the striking game and by knockout. And then the one loss, he's been actually talking about his submission game. He's lost one. Uh, his only loss came by submission. That was in a pretty crazy fight against Paul Craig in his UFC debut back on March 17, 2018, where he in a 3 round fight he literally got caught and submitted in a triangle choke with like 1 second left in the round. So that's Megmod Ankalov, who, like I said, if he wins this and wins it in impressive fashion, I don't know how you can't. Well, I don't know how it's possible not to see him matched up against Alex Pereira. And then Alexander Rockage, he's uh, uh, kind of I think he started out as like a boxer as well. Kind of started out at boxing as a boxer, kickboxer, and then uh, kind of transitioned to just being kind of a true mixed martial artist. Even though he doesn't have a lot of submissions either on his on his uh, on his record, on his resume. But once again, this like the first 3 fights, this almost seems like it's set up to get the favorite the win because Alexander Rockage, he's just 3-3 in his last 6 fights, and he's lost 2 in a row. One was a TKO to Jan Blachowicz due to a knee injury. I get that, but I don't think he was winning that fight anyways, and it was uh, 1-11 in the 3rd round. So he was probably going to lose that anyways. And then in his most recent fight against Yari Prohaschek, he got TKO'd punches at UFC 300, and that was April 13, 2024. So, I mean, all these fighters that are like the underdog that they use are going up against people that are basically better at the same thing that they do best. So it almost is like it's set up for the favorites to win almost is how I look at this. A good majority of these fights on this card. And he has 18 matches with 14 wins and 4 losses. And in the 14 wins, he has 9 by knockout. So it shows you he's striking. That's what he wants to do. But I mean, Megmod Ankalov, that's what he wants to do as well, and just never been beaten. I guess one beaten with a submission. So he has 9 knockouts, but only one submission. So Megmod Ankalov probably doesn't need to worry about that too much. And then 4 wins by decision, and then in the 4 losses, he's been knocked out twice, and those were his most recent fights in 2022, which that kept him out of action for 2 years before he turned around and got knocked out again in 2024, and then one by submission and then one by decision. Like I said, almost all of these fights on this card should end up being like stand-up wars, but I almost feel bad for the underdogs a little bit because like their best path to victory is what their opponents do best. But so in this light heavyweight bout between Megmod Ankalov versus Alexander Rockage, which I think this could set up a title shot for Megmod Ankalov if he wins this and wins it in impressive fashion. So in the light heavyweight bout between Megmod Ankalov versus Alexander Rockage, I'm going with Megmod Ankalov to win this. I think that we're going to see a knockout here. He's going to win this by knockout, and I really hope we do because the past couple pay-per-views since UFC 300, there haven't been a ton of finishes on the card besides let's see what's the name. Besides Pereira finishing Khalil Roundtree uh, in the last pay-per-view at UFC 307, and then of course Kevin Holland hurt himself. So I don't really look at that as an actual like stoppage due to submission or a pure knockout or anything like that. So hopefully I'm right on these and we get to see some crazy stand-up wars that end in a knockout would be nice. All right, now then, on to the co-main event. And this is like really the only fight on the main card where it's like really uh, opposite type of styles, the kind of the striker versus wrestler type of fight. But you can't take anything away from Robert Whittaker on being a true mixed martial artist that can get submissions, can get the knockout, can go 5 rounds. So he's a true mixed martial artist, but I would say his what he hangs his hat on is probably his boxing and kickboxing. But I think I saw something, a clip of him talking about how he's been training for a while. He's this is his second training camp where he was expected to fight Hazmat Chimaev. So that's the fight here: Robert Whittaker versus Hamzat Chimaev. So you got your striker and Robert Whittaker versus Hazmat Chimaev. But I guess Robert Whittaker, he's been training a lot of wrestling, and he was expected to fight Hazmat Chimaev like 2 times now, but he's had to pull out due to being sick. I guess have some type of stomach issue or bowel issue, or and throwing up and having to be hospitalized. So hopefully we're only 2 days away. So hopefully nothing like that happens, and hopefully he can make weight comfortably. But Robert Whittaker in his last 6 fights, he's 4-2, and he's two and has a 2-0 winning streak that he's on. He beat Paulo Costa and Iram Aleskarov. He knocked out on that was June 22nd, 2024 in the first round at the 149 mark of the first round. And in his 33 fights, he has 26 wins, 7 losses. In the 26 wins, he has 10 wins by knockout, 5 wins by submission, and 11 wins by decision. And then in the 7 losses, he's been knocked out 3 times. He's only been submitted once, so that could be a positive thing, seeing how he's uh, going up against Hazmat Chimaev, who has such a great wrestling game, maybe the best wrestler in the middleweight division, and loves to be able to choke his opponent out. So hopefully that shows that Robert Whittaker at least has a good submission defense game. And then he's lost 3 fights by decision. That would probably be the way I would expect Robert Whittaker to probably lose. Is even though he's only been submitted once, I could see him getting maybe choked out or put in a bad position by getting rocked to where he leaves his neck out and gets choked out, and then obviously he may just get uh, muscled and held down the whole fight and kind of laid and preyed on by Megmod Anklov, who definitely shows that he can do that, but he also wants to go for the finish. It shows that uh, Hazmat Chimaev might attempt to just hold him down and kind of lay and pray. So uh, Hamzat Chimaev, he's definitely a polarizing fighter just because of the way he talks. And early in his career, he was just seemed to be so dominant. Just his whole career, really, he's been so dominant until his last fight of it, Mara Usman, who actually took him the distance. It ended up being a majority decision. I guess one ref thought it was a draw, and then he got the decision by the other two. So that was like one of the few fights where he didn't look like just a complete monster and boogeyman against the fighters that his opponent. I guess Gilbert Burns gave him a good fight as well, but he is, let's see, 7-0 in the UFC, so he's on a 6-fight winning streak, and he's just a great wrestler. In his 13 matches, he has 12 wins, 0 losses. A lot of undefeated fighters on this card, and this is like on the main card. This it seems like this is more of a quality matchup and an equal matchup to where you can't really say Jemiah is the clear underdog or Robert Whittaker is the clear underdog. And this you'd like to say that this is a step up in competition. because I guess Kamaru Usman, he kind of got to fight a washed Kamaru Usman who took him the distance. Kind of want to say same thing about Gilbert Burns, and then had the whole catch weight incident against Kevin Holland, and he choked him out in the first round. Uh, but in the 13 wins, he has 6 wins by knockout, 5 by submission, and 2 by decision. So I mean, he can rock you and get you on the ground, and has devastating ground and pound. But he also has a varied a, 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 a long list of submissions he can get you, and chokes. He likes the Barbaro choke quite a bit. He's had three submissions by Barbaro choke out of the 5 that he's had. So that seems to be his favorite submission, his favorite choke. So in this bout between middleweight Robert Whitaker, the middleweight bout between Robert Whitaker versus Hamzat Chimaev, who I think this is kind of a title eliminator. Whoever wins this fight will get the next shot at the middleweight champion. Uh, and that's Bilal Muhammad. I mean, always gotta, always gotta fact check. No, that's the welterweight. Let's see here. Maybe Dracus du Plessis is the current middleweight champion. Yeah, Dracus du Plessis. I get the welter Muhammad and Dracus du Plessis mixed up of who's the welterweight and who's the middleweight champion. So either one of those I would like to see. I think it would be probably a better matchup if Hamzat Chimaev won, because both of them have such a great and elite ground game. Seeing them match up against each other, I think that would be an exciting fight. But in this middleweight bout between Robert Whitaker versus Hamzat Chimaev, I'm going with Hamzat Chimaev, and I mean I hope he comes back from all the illnesses that he's had, and I hope he looks as good as he has the majority of his career. But he hasn't fought for almost a year. Just a little more than a year, because that was his the majority win that he had over Kamaru Usman. That was at UFC 294, and he returned to middleweight. So he was fighting and having a hard time cutting down to welterweight. I guess that's kind of where I got confused on who the current champion was. But that was October 21st, 2023. So it's been a little, just almost exactly a year since he's fought. But I'm going to go with Hazat Chimaev to win this, and I think he's going to win by, I'll go ahead and say, Barbaro choke, so submission. I want to get some stoppages on this main card, because there really hasn't been very many on the main card of any of these pay-per-views since UFC 300. I think that would just make that a lot really exciting, because I mean there's not any like superstar fighters on this card. I guess you could say Max Holloway, but it's been a while since he's had the belt. And same thing kind of with Robert Whitaker. It's been a while since he's had the belt. And then I mean Ilia, he's an amazing young fighter. He's actually the only UFC champion under the age of 30. But I think for him to become like a superstar and more notable, he's going to have to defend that featherweight championship a little while. But anyways, we're moving on to that. So in the main event, we have a featherweight bout between Ilia Topuria, the champion, featherweight championship bout between Ilia Topuria, the champion, versus Max Holloway, the challenger, also the BMF title holder. And this is just like all the other fights besides the co-main event. This is a fight where both of these fighters definitely want to die by the sword, or definitely want to prove to the other fighter that they have the better boxing game, or the better boxer. Even though Ilia Topuria has 8 wins by submission. So if you were to say, I guess we'll find out who the better boxer is, but I would say if it starts going the in the negative way for Ilia Tapora in the striking game. I'm sure he would go directly to trying to get a takedown and trying to work his ground and pound and maybe his submission game. I mean, an intelligent fighter would definitely probably, if they feel that they have a better ground game than Max Holloway, which I think Ilia Tapora does. I think it would be wise for him to do that. But he stated that he doesn't think Max Holloway's boxing is the best in the UFC, or at least not the best in the featherweight division, and he wants to show that he has the best boxing. So I guess we'll find out. But he's obviously 6-0 in his last six fights. He is Yeah, and he's 6-0 in his last six fights. Let's see, one and 7-0 in his UFC career, and obviously he's undefeated. So he's 15 has 15 fights with 15 wins, zero losses. In the 15 wins, he has 8 wins by knockout. So that's him using that boxing, but he also has a great ground game that doesn't need to be underestimated, especially in this fight. I could easily see him just maybe losing a little bit of traction in the boxing or in the stand-up game, and him going to his great ground game. And I would say he's better than Max Holloway on the ground. So he has 8 wins by submission, and then just two wins by decision. So he's looking for the finish, and I hope that's what we get in this fight. And then Max Holloway, he's never been knocked out, so it's hard to say that that Ilia Tapora is going to be the one to do it. And he's not really that old, even though he's had tons of fights and tons of fights in the UFC. He's just 32. We're talking about Ilia Tapora being, what is he, 28, 29, just 27. So I mean, geez, he's still really young, and just kind of just entering his prime. So Max Holloway, let's see here, on someone else. Max Holloway he is basically his boogeyman uh, in his last 7 fights, because I'm going to add that his his monster, or his boss, or his boogeyman that he couldn't overcome was Alexander Volkanovski, who he fought 3 times, all 3 fights going to decision. I think a lot of that was due to Alexander Volkanovski going to his ground game that was better than Max Holloway. Not necessarily that he was a better striker than him, but Max Holloway had to have Ilia Tapora beat him for him, basically, to get the title into someone else's hands. But he is 5-3 in his last 7 fights. I'm just adding Alexander Volkanovski because he fought him twice in a row, and that's who he lost his featherweight championship to after he won it, and then defended it like 5 times. And he's on a 3-fight winning streak right now. Beat Dan Arnold, Jung Chang Sung, knocked him out, and then had the crazy last second KO punch knockout of Justin Gaethje at UFC 300 to defend the BMF title, or he won the BMF title. One performance of the night, one fight of the night, and he looks like he's just kind of on another level. You wouldn't have thought that Max Holloway, kind of after his rough stretch with his fights against Alexander Volkanovski, and not really being able to get over that hump of winning his belt back, still looked like he's had some really impressive wins in his last fights. And he's definitely a boxer and striker. Is probably his main style, and the his best chance of winning is that. But I mean, Ilia Tapora, he's a young, explosive, and good striker and good boxer himself. But in Max Holloway's 33 fights, he has 26 wins and 7 losses. And in the 26 wins, he has 12 wins by knockout, just 2 by submission. So that kind of shows that his ground game isn't it probably isn't as good as Ilia Tabora's, and then 12 wins by decision, and then in the 7 losses, he's never been knocked out, which that's what Ilia Tapora says he wants to do. He says he wants to be the first to knock him out, but I don't see that end up happening. And then he's lost just once by submission, and then 6 by decision. So he shows that he's very durable. But I just feel that Ilia Tapora has like a better skill set. I think this will start out with Ilia Tapora kind of testing the waters and actually seeing actually who has the better striking game. But I think the second that the tide turns and it looks like he's kind of losing in the striking game, I expect Ilia Tapora to start going for takedowns and just trying to get some ground and pound and attempt to get Max Holloway in submission, even though Max Holloway has a great submission game. So I expect this to be a really good fight, but I also don't expect Ilia Tabora to just outright dominate Max Holloway, even though that's what he came in and did to Alexander Volkanovski. I didn't expect him to completely clown and knock out Alexander Volkanovski either, but he did. So that was just one of the most dominant performances I've seen over a defending champion in a while. But I don't think he's going to do that to Max Holloway. I don't think he's going to knock him out. I don't think he's going to submit him. But I think he just has more ways to win this fight because if his elite striking gets gets bumped down a little bit because Max Holloway's a little bit better. He has elite ground game and too with submissions and ground and pound. So in this featherweight championship bout between Ilia Tapora, the champion, versus Max Holloway, the challenger, I'm going to go with Ilia Tapora to to win this. But I don't think he's just going to completely dominate Max Holloway. Max Holloway's shown over his career that he's durable and he's hard to get out of there, hard to finish. So I think this is going to go to decision, but I still think it's probably going to be a pretty impressive win by Ilia Tapora. And I think he'll try the striking game at first, but I think he'll go decide that's just unnecessary to even try to match Max Holloway in the boxing game, and just knows that he's just flat out a better wrestler and better on the ground. And I think he'll probably control probably 3 of the 5 rounds, basically control and dominate probably Max Holloway on the ground. So those are our picks. We'll go over them real quick. See if I can remember. We go over these such a bad short-term memory. You got to remember these myself. So on the main card of UFC 308, Ilia Tapora versus Max Holloway. The first fight on the main card is middleweight bout. We've seen Sahar Magmadov versus Armin Petrosyan, and I'm picking Sahar Magmadov to win this by knockout. I feel that they both have similar styles, but I think Sahar Magmadov is still the better striker, and that's pretty much the kind of the same story with the first 3 fights on this card. So the second fight is a featherweight bout between Leroy Murphy versus Dan Ige, and I think that Dan Ige is tough. So even though Leroy Murphy is a great striker, has a lot of knockouts, just like pretty much every fighter every fighter in every one of these matchups, there's a fighter that's undefeated. So I think Leroy Murphy. I think Dan Ige is kind of set up a little bit as kind of a gatekeeper, stepping stone for Leroy Murphy to kind of move up in the rankings. But I don't think Dan Ige is tough and is never been stopped. It doesn't get knocked out, so I don't expect Leroy Murphy to be the first one. But I figure in this featherweight bout between Leon Murphy versus Dan Ige, I think Leon Murphy still is going to win, but it's going to just be by decision. And in the light heavyweight bout, so on to the third fight, the light heavyweight bout, which should be, at least for Magmadov Ankalaev, should be with an impressive win, should be set him up as a title contender for Alex Pereira's belt at light heavyweight versus Alexander Rockage. I think Megmod Anklov is going to win this, and I think he's going to win this by knockout because once again, it's two fighters that both prefer to stand up and strike and have a lot of knockouts in their career. But I think Megmod Anklov is the better striker, and even if it doesn't go that way, he has a great ground game. You just don't see it that often because he doesn't have to go to it, but he's great in sambo. And then the co-main event, really the only fight on this card where it's like contrasting styles. Robert Whitaker prefers the box and kickbox, while Hamzat Chimaev prefers to wrestle, freestyle wrestling. And both of them, you could say, are elite at their styles in their division, the middleweight division. But I think I'm going to go with Hamzat Chimaev, kind of the a very polarizing fighter, and hopefully he comes back healthy from some of his bowel issues that he had that had him hospitalized. Hopefully he can come back and be just as good as his entire career, basically. Definitely his all the careers and every time we've seen him in the UFC, his UFC career. So in this middleweight bout between Robert Whitaker versus Hamzat Chimaev, I got Hamzat Chimaev winning this. And I think we just straight up said, because he's had three of his 5 submissions in his career have come by Barbaro choke. So I think he's going to get another one in here. I think he's going to may be able to stand up, or maybe he catches Robert Whitaker that kind of gets him in a scramble, and he's able to be able to take him down afterwards and be able to catch him in that Barbaro choke and submit Robert Whitaker. And then onto the main event, we have a featherweight bout between Ilia Tabora, the champion, versus Max Holloway, the challenger for the featherweight championship. And they both said they want to see who the better boxer is. And Ilia Tabora says he wants to show that he's the best boxer in the UFC, that he's the best boxer in the featherweight division, and that he wants to be the first person to knock Max Holloway out. But, I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. I think Max Holloway is going to maybe get a slight edge in the first round in the striking game, and I think Ilia Tabora is just gonna revert and go to his better ground game, and I think that's going to end up being how he beats Max Holloway, kind of similar to Alexander Volkanovski in their 3 fights. He took him down and controlled Max Holloway the majority of those 3 fights, and was able to take him down and hold him there and threaten him with some submission attempts and get some ground and pound. And I see Ilia Tabora doing that, but I don't think he's going to get the finish because Max Holloway is so tough. And obviously we mentioned that he's never been knocked out, but I still think Ilia Tabora just has more ways to win than Max Holloway does, even though he is a great former champion and a great boxer and just a really exciting fighter. So in this featherweight championship bout between Ilia Tabora, the champion, versus Max Holloway, I got Ilia Tabora winning this, but I think it's just going to be by unanimous decision where he wins 3 of the 5 rounds and just wins by unanimous decision. So that's the card. I wouldn't say I'm quite as excited about this card as I was 307, even though 307, besides the main event between Pereira and Roundtree, was kind of a letdown because there wasn't a lot of stoppages. But I'm just not quite as excited about this card just because there's not at least 2 championship fights on the card. There's no heavyweight fights, even though it's nice that there is at least a light heavyweight fight between Megmod Anklov and Alexander Rockage. So that should be exciting. But there's just no fighters that you could say at this moment are superstars. I guess you kind of could say that at one point in time, especially when Max Holloway was champion. You could say that probably about Max Holloway, and maybe you could have said that about Robert Whitaker. But I don't know. Just these are really great matchups and should lead to really good fights, if nothing else. But I think Ilia Tabora, to be considered like a superstar and on that level of Alex Pereira, is going to have a couple more dominant title defenses before he gets to that level. But I'm still excited about this fight, and really be interesting to just see if all these fighters, like in these matchups, are able to keep their undefeated records intact. That's something that's I don't know if I've ever seen that before, where like in every single fight in the main card, one of the fighters is has an undefeated record. So it'll be nice to see, and be exciting to see if they're able to keep those intact. But anyways, I think that's about all we have for you. So can I get a check, please?